Well, welcome, everyone. Great to have you here. I'm Natasha Crampton, Microsoft's Chief Responsible AI Officer.
And I'm Sarah Bird, our Chief Product Officer for Responsible AI.
So our program at Microsoft is really built on this fundamental proposition that people don't use technology that they don't trust. And trust is not something that you just get. You have to earn it. So Sarah and I together are doing the hard work across the company every day to try and make sure that our products are trustworthy by design. So today you're going to hear us talk both about our capabilities and our commitments. For us, we want to make industry-leading commitments to safe and secure and trusted AI. But we don't want those commitments to just exist on pieces of paper. We want to really build them into the products that we're building on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and actually, sometimes our capability development enables us to make new commitments. So for example, we were industry-leading in our customer copyright commitments, and we built copyright mitigations into our systems, and that innovation enabled us to make that commitment to our customers, which we know enabled many more people to adopt AI systems. And so we've learned just a ton doing this together for Microsoft and bringing capabilities and commitments together to put this into practice. But we also learn a ton from our customers and partners and the people that are really pushing the boundary of AI in practice. And so we're so excited for this session where we're going to bring some of our amazing partners and customers on the panel here to hear more about what they're learning in their practice of AI. So
fantastic.
With that,
come on out. So welcome. It's great to have you here. Could I ask you to kick off, Ian, by just introducing yourself, telling us a bit about your organization's philosophy towards AI trust, and just give us a sense of something that you're working on where you're deploying AI at scale while building trust in from the very beginning.
Yeah, great. Appreciate the question. Ian Swanson. I run AI security at Palo Alto Networks, the world's largest cybersecurity company. And I've been in AI for 20 years, whether it's running AI at AWS or Oracle or through multiple startups. And what I really see is I meet with CIOs and CISOs every single week. And I like to say there should be no AI in any enterprise without security of AI. Now, as a security leader, we don't just secure AI, we also use AI. So on the use case side, as we look at agentic workflows, I was just with our leadership team last week where we take a PRD, instantly convert it into a Figma full visualization, and then a prototype in code all within an hour to 2 hours using agentic workflows. And so we can move so incredibly fast with AI, but there's also a lot of risks with AI, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit.
Love it. Vivek.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha and Sarah, for the opportunity. My name is Vivek Sinha. I globally head AI and automation at Infosys. Infosys is a global system integrator company with almost 300,000 people across 50-plus countries, with almost 1,600-plus customers that we serve. Being the AI head that I am, we are building and prototyping solutions for some of our customers. And we always look at it from 3 lenses. The first one is, what do we really need to do for our employees, from making sure AI is trustworthy and safe and everything else that we'll talk about today, but also from our customers' point of view. And society at large, right? Because most of the things that we do actually contribute back to open source. So for us, trustworthiness means for employees, for customers, and for society in large. So that's how we position ourselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Florent Ricci. I work for Stanley Black Decker. I build a generative AI solution. And I'm going to echo my colleagues here. I mean, trust is really is key. Because if you have AI agents that you cannot trust, then your adoption rate is going to go down. And as we build tools that our end user can trust, we have to build agents that our customer and employee can trust as well.
Yep. Great. Thank you for that. So one of the things we've learned in our journey together in doing this is that you have to start with principles, but principles aren't enough. You have to actually work to really put them into practice. And so I'd love to hear from each of you sharing a little bit more on how you take those principles that each of your organizations has published and put them into practice.
So we have design principle. So first of all, we are augmenting mainly our employee. At least that's what we are doing today, and we place the human at the center of everything we do around AI. So and we want to, as a design principle, we have to make sure that every answer are fully grounded with the proper content, right? So that's also something that we put in the design principle. We do a lot of evaluation. So by design, we don't go live on any single agent if we didn't have done massive amount of testing. And when I say massive, it's thousands and thousands of prompts. And obviously, we are using LLM as a judge to evaluate those answers and so on at scale. So testing. And as we grow, and we are using also AI coding agent to augment us to develop faster, obviously, we need to make sure that the code we build has some security review, and we have to make sure we don't have vulnerabilities. So we are very careful on the security aspect as well.
For us, we have this principle that we call secure by design. So even when we are building solutions for ourselves, for our customers, there are core principles that we apply. Those 3 core principles that we talk about often with our customers and everybody is scan, steer, and secure. Right? How do you make sure you are looking out for vulnerabilities? How are you making sure you have enough technical and process-related guardrails that are there? And then how do you continuously monitor and measure that? So for us, the philosophy has been, how do you apply this in everyday job and every activity? And before we build and put a solution out for our customers, what we tend to do is we try to make Infosys as customer zero for ourselves, so we try it out on ourselves. And in the process, what we have done is we have learned a lot of tricks and tips that we take to customers, but more importantly, we have built our own responsible AI guardrails, we have built our own responsible AI platforms that we also take to market now, so on. So, for us, the philosophy has been secure by design, try it on yourself, and then you propagate to next set of customers that we have, which is employees and customers and society.
I love that because we do a lot of the similar stuff at Palo Alto Networks, and maybe a slight twist on the words, which is discover, assess, and protect. But there you go. Same.
But there needs to be 3.
Whichever
way you do it.
3, right? Yeah. So as we look at our first principles, definitely security is a non-negotiable for us. And as every company in the world is deploying AI, you need to make sure that it is safe, that it is trusted, and that it's secure. Again, 3 things. But as I lead engineering and product and go to market, and we have 80,000 customers, one of the things that I tell my team and our customers all the time is I need to meet you where you are at, where you are building. And so one of the things recently that we are really excited about this week was a partnership with Microsoft, with Foundry, and how we can add and take some of the great capabilities that we are doing in security and add that to where people are building and where they are shipping AI. And I think that's really important, the partner ecosystem in this space, because AI is so vast of the capabilities, and it's moving so quickly that there's a lot of vendors here, and we need to make sure that we tie them together so that you can build and deploy AI that is, again, safe, trusted, and secure, but also delivering real value.
Yeah, let's double click on that a little bit, and I'd actually like to hear from everyone here. We were talking earlier today, including about our great integration, that trust is a team sport, and we've very much found that in practice. Every day we've got Natasha's team and my team and our security team sitting together figuring out how to work through these, and of course the product teams that are trying to develop the product they're shipping. And so in your organizations, as you put all of this into practice, how do you get these different functions to work together and not in sequence, and have the different focus areas come together successfully?
So agree that I started a company back in the day called datascience.com, and we would say data science is a team sport. AI is a team sport, but also making sure that it's safe and that it's secure and trusted. And I'll tell a quick story. I was with a top 5 software company in the world about a year ago, and they had their AI team in one room, their security team in the other room. Zoom meeting, cameras pointing down, And halfway through, their AI team goes, hey, we're going to leave. This meeting's not really for us. I didn't have to say a word. The application security team gets off mute, and they go, whoa, 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 hang on here. Why is this not pertaining to you? And they said, well, we're the R&D team. We're not putting models in production or apps. We're doing research. And the application team says, wait a minute. Are you pulling in models from third parties? Are you putting it into this particular cloud that they work with? Are you connecting it to our customer data? And the team said, yes, yes, and yes. And the security team said, you don't realize that you're pulling in grenades and pulling pins. Yeah. And my point of this story is one of education. I think it first needs to start, yes, it is a team sport. Yes, we need to do secure by design. But we can't assume that all of these functions within the organization understand AI and how vast the capabilities are, or even the perhaps implications as it relates to safety and trust. So education is critical.
No, and I will add something to that, and this is funny stories of one of our failures, So we must retell it many times so that we learn from it. We actually built a couple of agents for one of the largest insurance companies, and when we started talking about getting into production, the legal team actually came in and said, whoa, 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 wait a minute, how can you do this? A, B, C, here are the challenges, have you solved them? And we really worked hard to get those in record time to build and ready to deploy. It took us equal amount of time to just get through the hurdles of legal challenges and security challenges, and this was a bit early in the the cycle of agents and so on and so forth. So the learning for us was it is a team sport. We got to get people around and take everybody along with us. Otherwise, we would just double the timeline.
And that's funny because at Stanley we started the other way around, literally. So like 3 years back when we started and we had that ChatGPT that went live early 2023, I remember the legal team, the data privacy team, they are very, very worried about AI. And they said, shut down everything, shut down immediately all those stuff, IP concern, data confidentiality leak, and blah, blah, blah. And then we had to react very quick at Stanley because we saw the potential of that technology, and we thought as IT leaders, if we don't enable people with that technology, we're going to be left behind. So very quickly, what we ended up doing was to set up an AI working group within the company with members, obviously from IT, but also from the legal team, from the data privacy team, and the cybersecurity team. And we were meeting every other week, discussing about what's coming, what are the AI we want to enable, what are the new use cases we want to work on, and so on. And talking also with Microsoft and Gartner, we ended up deploying our own private ChatGPT very early in 2023. But now we keep having, after 3 years, we keep having those bi-weekly meetings with that AI working group, and we are keeping those discussions very warm.
I think this reflects so much of what we've learned at Microsoft along the way as well. I mean, these multidisciplinary teams are really pulled together from the very outset are just critical to success here. And I'd say certainly in the early days of our work at Microsoft, I think we did have moments where people were talking right past each other, just researchers not quite connecting with the engineers, or the policy people and the engineers speaking different languages. But you need to build the structures to make those teams come together, learn to speak one another's language. I tend to think we often need quite sort of T-shaped people working in this space, really deep expertise in one area, but an ability to bridge across and ask the right questions and engage in another sense. And
that's why I wanted to add that when you understand the perspective of each other, you understand the worries, and you can talk and just talking, explaining what you plan to do, how you're going to do things, and so on. Sometimes it just helps everybody understanding.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We've learned a ton from each other in doing that. And I think we've all been in a room where someone has come in and said, why didn't you call me sooner? And so something that has been important in this practice is, I think Ian said it, first, like getting in there at the beginning, right? You need to start early in this. And then the other thing is the point of all of our different engineering teams, it can't be their job to discover all of the stakeholders that need to be involved to go through this process. And so the more that you can make a known group or an advisory board or a working group or something, where you're also building that shared language and that shared understanding, and people know that that's the place to go for that, I think has made it much easier for us.
No, the change management aspect that is involved in this with humans, I think as time progresses, we might do much better when everybody will have agents, and the agents can, bring everybody in, get consent and so on. So,
or we'll be saying, why isn't my agent in there?
Yeah, I think the conversation here also reflects the fact that as you're scaling up a program within your organization, you are probably going to take different approaches over time. In the earliest days, the center of gravity for our program originally was really in the research part of Microsoft, where we had amazing researchers looking around the corners and seeing and sort of hypothesizing what could happen. But as we've matured and scaled out, it's been incredibly important that we have our engineering partners at the table every single step of the way. So I think thinking about, what are the structures that can be durable, like, for example, our responsible AI champs community. This has been a part of what we've had in our ecosystem from the very beginning, but also how to adapt it as you scale your program up across the organization.
Can I tease out scale or innovation? So again, I meet with CISOs all the time, and what I hear from them is, hey, Ian, we're new to AI. We're kind of just getting started. How many of you in the room are like new, just getting started on your AI workloads? Good, because I would have said, you're not. You have AI deployed today. I oftentimes ask a question to an audience, which is, how many machine learning models or models do you think you have live within your organization? And I'll get a response somewhere between like 100, 200 models. I work with a pretty large e-commerce company, not the world's largest. They have over 100,000. A lot of the financial services organizations I work with have 300, 500,000 models. Yeah. Why am I talking about models? Models are the engine to AI applications. Models and AI applications are kicking off agentic workflows, MCP clients to servers to agent to agents to tool calls. The sprawl is already there. It's already massive. And that's where a lot of the challenges come in and the understanding. But the first step is you're doing it today, and start talking to your teams about what you're doing and how do you up-level that to make sure that it's safe and that it's secure.
Well, why don't we do exactly that? Vivek also said, the magic word agents earlier, and I know everybody has been asking me, and we learn, so much from you all on this. What is an agent that you've maybe intentionally put into practice in your organization, not a shadow one that you've discovered later, and what did you learn from that experience and deploying that?
The example that I can actually give is, from Infosys' point of view, we do a lot of shared services organization set up for our customers. And so we basically take a lot of tickets that come from IT side and fix them. What we did was we built a platform that we call Infosys Topaz Fabric, and we built the agents on the Fabric platform to do very basic things, incident analysis. As soon as it comes, can you figure out what the ticket is about and put it into the right queue? And what we were trying to do over a period of time is there a way we can improve productivity of our software engineers that are supporting all of these applications? Eventually, the fancy term is AI ops and so on. But when we started, we really found the productivity improvement that we were looking for. That makes Infosys competitive in the marketplace because we can go do some of these tickets resolutions at much lower cost than others. But that is one great example where I see, from Infosys' point of view, took an early advantage, and we have been utilizing that for last 3.5 years now.
Early agent days.
Yes, the very first use cases on our side has been obviously a very popular one around customer service. Yeah. So trying to augment our customer service representative with all the product information about our product, so they don't have to go to different places to find the relevant information. And also there is a lot of turnover in those team, and then if you want to be productive faster and so on, it's good to have to be augmented. Also in the marketing space, a lot of use cases, content generation, obviously, product description, features and benefits, so following some copywriting rules in a very consistent way. So a lot of productive translation is big as well. Translation was a massive use cases, and then IT support. We have been also to that road. But that was primarily customer engagement, so sales rep as well. We have some use cases when it comes to find the cross-reference between our competitor and our own product. Our salespeople spend a lot of time, and AI is very good at doing this kind of matching process, even if the data is not perfectly aligned. So that was the main use cases we started with.
And Florent talked about language. Sorry, I remember a very interesting use case that we solved for a customer. This is a large automobile manufacturer that sells across the world. And whenever an engine of that customer goes for maintenance and repair, the maintenance and repair engineer would probably make the notes in their local language, so Korean in Korea, French in France, and English. So before they could introduce their products or their automobiles to a new market, they wanted to make sure what's wrong, what can we possibly encounter. But there's no way because language was that barrier. One of the solutions that we built for them was we converted from each of those languages to English using a large language model. So there was an agent that will go through maintenance requests and comments and convert. Now they have a huge database of all the problems that they encountered in that geography, which can be then taken into the rollouting. So that was very interesting, given the language conversation that we were talking about.
So what is an agent? Let's maybe first start there. I view agents very similar to what RPA was, like in the past. The difference is the AI component. So as RPA was looking at rules and logic and APIs, the difference with AI is like now it's able to plan, it's perceiving, it's iterating, it's actually taking on these events as if it's a digital twin of myself, and it's hopefully even doing better than I would in those certain use cases. So what have we done? We have products all throughout Palo Alto Networks that leverage agents. One of them we call agentics. I don't know how good we are at branding on that. It's pretty clear. It's an agent workload. And what does agentics do? It does what my CEO asks me every single time in the room with them, which is 5 times a week, which is, Ian, I don't want to just show more red lights and dashboards and create tickets. Like I want to drive solutions. And so what agentics is able to do, it's able to work through all the security logs, create runbooks that can have a human in the loop to verify those, and then build to say, yes, those are the things we want to be able to execute, and then automate that over time. And so what it does is the mean time to resolution of a security ticket goes from not just minutes and hours to what could be seconds on that. And so it truly is phenomenal now of how we can solve customer problems, but then start working on new and other novel ways of how we can support our customers. So there's a lot of great things that we could do with agents, but there's also some risk.
And Florent, if we take your example of the customer service agent for a moment, you mentioned that pre-deployment, you've run a lot of tests on the performance of this agent. And it would be helpful if you could sort of tease out for the audience here, what were the risks that you were focused on monitoring for, testing for pre-deployment? And as you now think about the possibility of moving from an internal-facing deployment of this agent to a customer-facing deployment, how does that change how you think about the risks, what you're going to do by way of post-deployment monitoring? Take us through some of that.
Yes, so there's a lot to unpack here. So obviously testing, the data has been always a challenge because your data is never clean 100%. So you need to spend a lot of time to run evaluation before you go live, evaluation when you are live, post go live, to check for hallucination, groundedness, relevancy, all those good things. Obviously, the data, one of the challenges is how do you keep the data up to date? Because every day we are adding new product, we are adding new policy, new processes, and our AI agent has to be up to date on all of that. So refreshing the index in a timely manner, monitoring all those things, making sure we have the freshest data and boosting, scoring those things and boosting the fresh data and so on has been a challenge, right? And then when you deploy those solutions, people, our end users, or our employees, they don't understand really how those models are built, right? They are statistical models. And when you connect, and they can have hallucination, right? So the answer can be wrong. And even in your data, you may have conflicting information. Even when you connect your data, the hallucination rate is way lower, obviously. but still, you can have some errors, right? So what we are doing, obviously, we have been doing a few things. We are using semantic kernel, and we are using self-reflection. So when the agent retrieves the data, it will self-reflect to make sure he has the right understanding on the question, on the intent, and he can double-check the relevancy somehow of the data. But you need to be careful because you need to find the right balance between accuracy, latency, and cost. Because if you do too many checks, now the answer will come in 2 minutes, and then it's useless for the customer service agent. So that was one of the challenge here. And then, obviously, we have to do a lot of training on the user, on the human, to tell them, when you get an answer from the agent, it could be wrong. So you better check the citation and make sure that the content that has been retrieved makes sense to the question you are asking for. And what we have seen initially is people were not really looking at the citation because I wanted to make sure that they were using it. So I started to put some tracker on the user interface to see if they were opening the citation. And when we started, only 1% of the customer service team were opening the citation to fact check where the data is, where the answer was coming from. And then what they have done, they have done some gamification, like winning points and like a small contest. And if at the end of the quarter you have the most number of points, because anytime you open the citation, you win some points and so on, then you're going to get a gift card and so on. And that has driven the behavior to a 30% and 30% to 50% rate. So we still have a lot of work to be done, but that was part of the journey.
Can I try to put a headline on some of what you were saying? Every single company, as you put these AI apps in production, these agentic workflows, you need to test, evaluate, benchmark. You need to red team these. Like, there's no reason not to. And one of the things I was really excited about the partnership that we announced last week with our friends at Microsoft is let's add red teaming capabilities so that you can test and see how susceptible your applications are to prompt injection attacks, leakage of data. Are they going to hallucinate? Can they be toxic or talk about our brands in a way that we don't think it should? And so we need to make sure that we build in these capabilities. I'm excited that we've now added this capability through this partnership that we have with Microsoft. But I view this as a non-negotiable. Every single company I meet with, you got to test this before you put it in production, which is, I think, a lot of what you were talking about.
And thank you, Jan, for jumping in. And just going back to your question, because you're right, we have been working on internal facing, and what is next in our journey is external facing. So that's something we are working on. So red teaming, all those good stuff that we have seen in the new announcement. So we plan to use those things, obviously. But also we were thinking like, we need to be very clear on what the agent can do and what they cannot do. So guardrails. And basically, in the guardrails, we're going to have some intent scoring. And I know semantic kernel has some features to detect the intent and so on. And based on the intent, if we believe it's a low-risk use case, then this is fine. The AI agent will handle it. But if we determine that, OK, product compatibility on saw blade and so on, that might be a little bit dangerous. So maybe we don't want the agent to answer. So we will have to figure out what are the low and high risk profile on the intent, and we will define guardrails.
So you've mentioned things that are near and dear to my heart. I feel like I'm on a soapbox about testing all the time and red teaming. That's something that we found critical in our practice, and that you don't just want to test; you want controls and guardrails in place. And you mentioned a couple other things that I know are top of mind for organizations that we're hearing around, like agent sprawl and shadow AI. And what do you see as kind of the playbook for those?
So I think there's two different areas that companies are looking at with AI, or at least how do you protect the AI. There's how employees are using AI within your companies. A lot of AI is being used through the browser. So how are you controlling what AI is available? What data can be shared with AI? So I view that as like employee usage. And that's where shadow AI, there's a lot of big category around there. The other one is your build and deploying applications, whether they're internal or external. And we test, but then we also need to put real-time, runtime protections on that. And so we could do that at the point of the network. We could do that through APIs. We do it with partnerships that we have. That you can see that if there's tool sprawl, if there's tools that are being called to do actions that they don't have permissions to do, So who has access? Who's been delegated permissions is really important. Are we seeing memory being manipulated, which is a whole other topic within agentic workflows? Are your agents susceptible to what are called indirect prompt attacks? The bottom line is there's a lot of ways that agents could potentially go rogue. So while there's value, we need to make sure that we put those guardrails in place, which could be at the system level, but also protections in place at runtime.
You know, even simple things like role-based access and control, they're very hard to implement because you have to almost inherit from organizations, Active Directories, and so on. You know, some of the other things that you mentioned, we were trying to say, if the agent has access to data, how can we provide it the least possible data access that is needed? That is by principle. Can I keep it to minimum unless it's elevated and so on? You know, some of these in practices are becoming very hard because, you know, there are different groups in the organizations like Shadow IT that probably are trying to do it in their own way or just getting to a partner or a SaaS product and just going in their way. So it's getting harder to do this, but it must, like we've been saying, you know, it must to do it.
Yeah, Natasha and I have both lived through multiple times at Microsoft where we're like, we will just inventory all our AI, and then we will figure out stuff, right? And it never works, and obviously...
The inventory side's hard.
Yeah, exactly.
The denominator keeps changing.
Right, and so obviously the explosion of AI, we don't even pretend that we're going to inventory this in that way, and so it became pretty clear that we need tools and that you really need to build this in from the beginning, and you know, that's one of the reasons that we're excited about Agent 365 and Foundry control plane, but we said, we just need to build on, you know, primitives we already have, like identity. This can't be an on-the-side thing that someone has to register or stuff is going to be missing. It's never going to work. And so I think that really investing in sort of platforming capabilities we've found is essential for making this work for ourselves, and then hopefully that also helps everybody else.
We just had our earnings call, and the three themes were AI, identity, and quantum were the three themes, you know, and so we're seeing tons of advancement of innovation and risk, you know, tied to it. But we're going to see, I think, those three categories, just more and more work that's needed in there over the next 3 to 5 years.
You're really good at the threes.
Sorry. I'll start to add 2 next time.
I think another interesting observation that came out of this exchange just now is really thinking about the nature of the use case that you're working on. Context matters hugely, and I think doing this work at scale really involves thinking about what truly are high-risk use cases in the context of your particular business, and what are not. What are the low-risk use cases for which there are well-known patterns of mitigation and of measurement that you can supply and educate your teams on, and they can move forward with those use cases while you really reserve your expert hands-on, deep guidance for the high-risk use cases. Yeah. At Microsoft, we've had a long-standing concept within our program that's just operationalized across it around sensitive uses, these being the highest impact uses where we spend most of our expert time. But in the same vein of context really mattering a lot, I think, Vivek, you know, you're working across, in a global business, across lots and lots of different contexts around the world. And, you know, we see societal and regulatory expectations varying very significantly across those contexts. And I embrace what Ian said earlier. It's really important for a successful AI use case. You have to meet people where they are, and that includes their local context. So how do you think about building, you know, a global program that scales while having some sensitivity to local needs?
That is one of the hardest problems that we have, to just take everybody along. You know, I think there are a few golden rules that we have figured out in the process of managing or doing AI work for so many customers. You know, the first one is build something that is at core, but can be regionally tailored, right? So, which is make sure your basic guardrails, basic policies, can steer, secure concepts are actually deployed at the core, but you give enough autonomy at the regions to actually override them. That's number one. So build your programs and solutions like that. where there's examples of extension that regions can actually deploy. The second, the most important thing that we have figured out is if there is a way to take the policies and put them as code, right? So when at the endpoint it gets executed, either before pre or post model input and output, but also when you call the tools, we were there at the control panel conversation before, how do you make sure tool calls are also, how do we put these policies as code so that people are not, it is not dependent on people to actually execute them by every time there is an action that an agent does, it's taken care of. And the third is change management. There is, for humans, there is no other way but to get them logged in a room and get them through why this is useful for you and how you should incorporate them. And, globally, I think one of the studies that we did was most people are actually nervous about and are excited about AI. If you look at that chart, European countries and United States are most nervous and least excited. The guys that are actually most excited are South Asian economies, China in particular, and they're less nervous, which is kind of weird, right? Because most of it is actually invented here, and they are more consumers. So how do you take everybody along? Because it is important to educate them, saying here are the risks. But on this side, we have to say, look, there is an innovation opportunity here. Particularly in Europe with EU AI Act and GDPR restrictions and so on. I am thinking that I see there is some sort of leveling that is happening. People that started with conservative have started to become a bit more flexible. People that were like wild west, they have started putting together now a bit more policies and processes. So it is a combination of these efforts that actually gets us the outcome that we have been looking for.
Can I add on the innovation and learning side of it? I'm going to ask for full room participation. How many of you are in the engineering role, like fingers on keyboard? All right, that means most of you are in a business role. Build with AI. It's so easy to use Agent 365, Foundry, other solutions that are out there, and you'll start to realize what is possible, in the levels that you can go. I'll give a silly, simple example. My daughters are 15 and 13, and I swear for the last 15 years, maybe not that long, 10 years, we've been arguing about how to do math. Even though I know the answer, I know nothing about math. My kids tell me, I don't know how to do math the new way. And so I got so tired of it 2 weeks ago and these arguments around the dinner table that I was like, I'm going to build an app to do that. And I leveraged these tools, take a picture of a math homework assignment, the picture of the formula that needs to be solved, step-by-step instructions of how my daughter does math or is taught to do math, and a way that she can interact with it. It took me 2 hours to build that. And yes, I can engineer, but I haven't written a line of code for 15 years in any of my companies. I would just say experiment and explore, and it's going to open up your minds to even the challenges, but also what is possible.
I think another thing that's important is making sure you're listening and building feedback channels. So we have, what is a best practice where we have systems out there looking for new attacks, and then we update our prompt injection attack system, prompt shields to cover those new attacks. And we made an update to our system to cover something. And then we started getting calls from our customers that are using the Greek language. And apparently something we had put in specifically was definitely over-triggering in Greek, and that wasn't well captured in our test, and we needed to fix our testing. But if we didn't have those feedback channels from customers, what we thought was a great improvement for everyone, we wouldn't have realized isn't working well in a certain area. And so obviously then the next thing is we should go expand our testing so that we catch that before we deploy it. But you don't know what you're going to miss, and so you have to have those feedback channels all over the world, in whether that's in product or through customer support or things, and be humble about the fact that I'm not going to know by myself what makes sense in Greek, and so I absolutely need to be able to be listening and adapting.
And I just want to jump in on one thing you mentioned, Vivek, about the human dimension. Because I think we have a nice story about one of our agents, the customer service agent, because for many months we were calling that customer service agent, and we were struggling to make some adoption, and also the customer service representative were worried about this agent and not very comfortable on using that agent and so on. And then we decided to personify this agent. And we said, why don't we find a face for this agent and a name maybe for this agent? And there was one of the best customer service representatives that was going to be retired. And then we said, why don't we name this agent with Rochelle, with her name, in memory of this employee? And believe it or not, that has created an emotional connection to that agent. And that has driven huge adoption and trust, because Rochelle, the true Rochelle, was really trusted. She was one of the best. She has been rewarded many times. And then now she left, but we still have Rochelle's spirit somehow, and people still go to Rochelle.
I'm going to copy that.
No, we go to Rochelle, and they get answer, and they say, oh, ask Rochelle. Oh, Rochelle should know. She's great. And that has helped us a lot, actually.
That's
amazing. So we have only a few minutes left, so we're going to be ambitious here and do 2 rapid fire questions for everybody here. Rapid fire. So first, what is the big problem that you want to solve next?
Wow.
Rapid fire. Okay.
I can answer why.
I mean, the easiest thing would just be to secure all AI that's being developed.
That's a big one.
We are big proponent of what we call now spatial intelligence. So, most of the large language models are token predictors and linear, one-dimensional. We really want to get to a place where we're able to 3D space predict types. So we think that is the next frontier, because visual intelligence is probably going to bring all these AI capabilities that we are talking from a computer screen to actually in the real world. And that is one thing that we are really.
I think for me, I mean, the way I see that is the new way of working. Because, and you touched on that, Sarah, this morning on the outer loop, human loop. And that resonates a lot with me this morning, because now we are augmenting our people on what they used to do, but we are not reinventing the way they work. And today, the AI agent is on the shoulder of our agent, but tomorrow probably the AI agent will be on the front line, and our customer service people will be monitoring what the AI agent is doing. So it will be the other way around. And that means their job is going to be slightly different to what they do today. And I think the big challenge for me moving forward is how do we embed those agents to support our business processes, but not to do what we used to do before and just augmenting what we used to do, but reimagining. If you have an endless workforce, how would you do things differently?
I love that, and that's very close to my answer, where what I think is so exciting about this technology is that it can make everyone in the world a builder. But we all know that if people who've been in the discipline for a long time, we went through a lot of training to understand how to build and how to build responsibly, and now we're enabling many, many more people to do that. And so how do we change the way that we do this so that everyone is doing it in a way that is responsible and they're able to create systems that are trustworthy? And so I think that's the thing that's very much on the problem that I want to solve and that's on my mind. Natasha?
So I welcome exactly this type of discussion, because I think what we've seen from this discussion is that from people working on the front lines of really building and deploying these systems, you just get an incredible set of rich insights about the how. I think we have a shared sense that, yes, we want to make sure that these systems are trustworthy. Of course, that's very important as a North Star, but there are very concrete things that you need to do in order to realize that goal. So I think for Microsoft's part, we will continue to do this work within the company and make sure that we are leading by example and making sure those commitments get turned into capabilities that are not used just within the company, but that we can make available to our customers and partners and help support the ecosystem as well. I think this is definitely a space where we are better together, and this generosity in sharing your learnings today from these hands-on use cases is just much appreciated. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.